Hey, it is your buddy, Peace and Harmony with you here today. Much love going out to all the beautiful, empowered harmonizers. We're zooming in and focusing in a little bit more in depth on a great viewer question, and that is to talk about the guilt that ensues after you sort of decided not to go out with the female psychopath. Sort of the guilt of becoming unaddicted, the guilt of becoming unhinged, the guilt of becoming sort of in the clear, seeing things clearly. After, so long you've been primed like a gas tank. Do you ever remember the gas tanks, how you prime the engine? You have been primed through repeated, oftentimes the psychopath, oftentimes there is this sort of seduction, sort of this psychic vampirism, or sort of vacuous sort of energy that you feel that they sort of command all. In other words, it becomes very difficult to resist. It becomes overwhelming. People oftentimes feel that they will do things that are out of character, almost as if it is a possession. Why would I tap into my 401k to do this? Why would I tap into my children's, college funds to do this for this person? Why would I take in their kids? Why would I give them this key? Why would I liquidate my business? So there's oftentimes very, strange and uncharacteristic decisions that people will do while they're in the sort of spell of this individual. And a lot of people think it's a fantasy or fantasy-like, fairy tale-like, just sort of better than you've ever experienced a relationship with another woman. I mean, euphoria, just off the charts with hyper arousal, sort of sexual innuendos. Everything becomes sexualized. But oftentimes there's a very much a lack of connection, even though this sort of, overwhelming physical addiction and connection, there's very little connection with these people. And so people become sort of very mixed up. What I would call a psychological hijacking takes place, meaning the way that someone naturally and organically thinks, the way that they are within themselves, their own sort of sensibility, their personality, their je ne sais quoi, what makes them unique or original. These are oftentimes qualities that people will, not secretly esteem, but, know to be their strength and their identity. And oftentimes they've directed and guided their life by these strengths. It's who they are. But oftentimes this target of a pillar of strength is like a shiny target or a shiny object for a female psychopath to take down, like a bow and arrow on a target, or like a shotgun to a, they literally take a target, which is very different, I would say, than most other people. You'll find very little people, and we do have a lot of viewers who are asking about stalking and stuff. We're not talking about this right now. We're not going to talk about stalking. We're talking really about the this viewer question that is, with this sort of guilt that you find when you sort of expose them, or you're just not feeling things are going awry, or you're just sort of unsettled. It becomes very difficult to extricate or detach or pull yourself away. It is really truly like a very different and unique addiction. I would say it's almost like a suction cup. I mean, people literally, energetically, oftentimes cannot pull themselves away. They cannot sort of stand up and really sort of speak and pronounce their usual decisiveness. They're really, sort of in the sauce. They're really in the mix of not seeing things clearly. And oftentimes guilt is one of the undergirding or sort of underlying feelings that will sort of become like an emotional undertow from being able to see things clearly. In other words, pulling you back, snapping you back into the addiction, pulling you back to where you don't want to be. You feel a compulsion. This can feel like a momentary, really episode of becoming obsessive and compulsive. Like some people are on the daily, it becomes an addiction, but a very different, I would say, addiction than like a pain, opioid addiction or a gambling addiction. I mean, I think it has this sort of same craving, but it has a different personal attachment and a personal element to it, which then becomes corroded. Your boundaries become just sort of annihilated and non-important, non-existent. It's almost like they become dismantled. They become just sort of, unplugged. They are oftentimes very difficult to reestablish or replug in, because the female psychopath will usually take the plugs out of your boundaries, yank it out, and you don't got none, and you didn't see her unplugging it because she's been doing it behind your back. You didn't realize it was done with seduction. It was done with this enigmatic and cryptic communication. Oftentimes a female psychopath will use a lot of, I would say, very sort of cryptic and not really in the normal flow type of communication. Not what we're having like right now. I mean, I wouldn't be sitting here at lunch and talking to you guys about this. I mean, we're here in the course of a video. But what I'm talking about is just a way of sort of what they... It creates really sort of an atmosphere, if you will, around them, which is, there's an energy field. It's very strange to talk about, but if you've been in this, you sort of know what I'm talking about, and it's very difficult because sometimes it's very painful for them to own what they're sensing. I mean, it becomes very scary because they've never encountered this type of person before. This is not like, this is not just someone who's selfish, someone who is really driven, someone who's really smart, someone who's really attractive. There is something else going on, and it's basically like an iron rod of coldness, which is going on underneath, which is invisible to the eye, which is like zapping you and zapping out your nerve endings and sort of deadening your values and eliminating your face, if you will, from how you interact with the world and society. It becomes very convoluted, cryptic. I mean, whether this person is in your workplace, or I think for a lot of people and a lot of men here, this is someone who they've encountered on a romantic level. And when we talk about, the intimacy, it's way overboard. It is way off the charts. I mean, it's just the high risk behavior, the inappropriate, ness and dangerousness, peaking on, very dangerous, innuendos, suggestions, meetings, different things, weird things, that take place at weird times of the night. I mean, this is known as, how a female psychopath will break their target down. They will break them down so they can't think. Their regular order of thought is dismantled. They can't focus on their work. They can't focus on their shower. They can't focus on their grocery shopping. They can't focus on going to bed. This is all prime time and all prime target for a female psychopath to put in a jab to let them know that the female psychopath is thinking about them. And then for a lot of men, they, get all giddy up on the I am desirable train. So they're oftentimes, a female psychopath, if they have targeted the men for this, because there's something else that they want, there's always something that they want, either just, not for the challenge of the conquering, but there's usually some other ulterior motive. I mean, you'll figure it out. They're very parasitic in nature. In other words, they're something they need to suck out of or take out of people. This is how they perceive things. This is not how most people think, nor how most women think. This woman's a gold digger or whatever. We're talking, I mean, sure, some psychopaths can be this way, but we're talking about a different type of person. Someone with no empathy, someone with no conscience. We're talking with someone with no moral compass, with no regrets, no remorse, no feel bad that I did this to you. In fact, they take quite a delight in doing that to you, to ruining your persona, to ruining your reputation, to ruining your sense of yourself, making you embarrassed, shaming you, humiliating you, getting things that they, take from you, such as authority, such as one's business accounts, one's keys, taking, also, and just sort of claiming your property for their own if you're not in a marriage, there's, and just sort of taking their place. And, they will do strange things or leave things out there that sort of leave like a trail that you have to sort of find and hunt, like you're on a scavenger hunt. Why did they leave this receipt out here? Why did they leave this book open? Why did they leave this scratch on the table, which clearly has somebody's initials? Like strange, weird things, that keying of people's cars, leaving strange things written in your windshield, that have faded away, that make you sort of feel this gaslighted and brainwashed feeling. They will play with your perception. They do this. And this will create a guilt from owning your reality because it'll contradict the addiction that you have. It'll contradict the fantasy, which is not what you really want. The reality is what you really want, and reality is better than the fantasy. But you can't see that when you're in the addiction. You can't see perspective. You cannot, you just are not in touch, like literally and figuratively. So it's really important to understand that this is part of sort of the clause is this guilt and that feeling that things just don't make sense, even after you have exposed them. You've already agreed that this person is, this is too much. You've already agreed and said, it's gone too far. You've already agreed, but yet you can't find that you can change. There is a guilt that sort of keeps you sort of with a trauma and in a confusing relationship, a hurtful relationship in place in your life, even though it's not in your best interest. People have a very difficult time letting it go. I mean, it might make sense rationally, but there is a guilt oftentimes that stems, I would say, from many things, particularly that of one's identity as a man. They feel guilty, letting this go. Maybe this is what I always dreamed about, or there might be, all these feelings that you might have sort of expressed to this person that you kind of say, can't unsay, but don't worry about it because they're not thinking about it anyway. They're just focused on the manipulation, pushing your buttons. They're not thinking about the lovey-dovey. It is all an act. And you oftentimes, you just cannot believe the degree and extent of the act and the fact that it's going 24/7. I mean, and most men just, so they can't, I would say, compute and understand the level at which they function. So they don't even think that most women could function at this level, that it just would not be, they would not be capable of this. And, when they expose the female psychopath for who they are, i.e. they learn about another relationship, or, things have gotten too much, you're unhappy, promises aren't being kept or made, plans that you have aren't happening, things that you thought were going to happen in your business, just it did not come through. And yet, you need to take stock of this and take stake of this and say, wow, this is really where things are at. And it's okay to admit that. It doesn't mean that you're weak or at fault. It just basically means that you are basically correctly surmising the situation. You're correctly identifying, that something is awry, and that just because such and such is over the top doesn't mean that this is meant to be in your life, in a positive way whatsoever. So you have to be able to get that feeling sort of sorted out and compartmentalized, and then remove the guilt, from your thinking, from your thinking, and then not feeling bad that even if things aren't sort of settled, even though it doesn't compute, it didn't work out, it's okay to let it go with the sort of frayed ends. Even if it's not all wrapped up in a bow, it's pretty much wrapped up enough. You've already tried to put a bow on it and make it nicey nice or whatever it is. It is the way that it is, and that's how it's supposed to be. I mean, period, end of story. And that is what you need to embrace. And that a healthy relationship, oftentimes, yeah, it can be as exciting and fun and stimulating, but it'll have a better juice for you than the fake. It'll have a real, it'll have a tinge of certainty, and it'll have a tinge of trust, and it'll have a sort of like, I can count on this. And that you're not sort of deluding yourself through a double and triple backflip while trying to just stay, and stand on your feet. This is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, with you here today, and I hope that these videos do help. Please share, please subscribe, and for goodness sake, please donate for more great tools, videos, discussions, and support. Peace out, peace in, peace be with you, and have a beautiful evening.